All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with my partner, Bob Rose. How you doing tonight, Bob?
Staying warm. I'm sitting inside, but I'm still dressed in two layers for the show. How about you, Alan?
Well, I'll tell you what, for a change, I know exactly what that's like because we had that Arctic front pass through, and the high today was 31. So I know outside the city, it was in the 20s and the teens. So, yeah, we're going to have tonight's supposed to be even colder because the front came through last night. So, yeah, I don't need to have, I like it cold, but I don't like it frozen. My dad went to leave for work this morning. He's like, I had to pour water on my car just to open the door,
Yeah.
you know. So I went and checked all the cars tonight, make sure everybody's doors open like they're supposed to, cars start like they're supposed to, the whole bit.
hmm
Um, there was some news today over in Airline Drive. Fans got what they wished. Pete Carmichael is no longer with the team. Um, they also let go two surprising names, Kodi Burns and uh, somebody no one even knew even was on the team, but offensive assistant Bob Bicknell. And if you're wondering if that's an important position, that's kind of the kind of stuff Joe Brady did when he was with
Yeah.
the Saints, and he's now being talked about at least as a possible replacement offensive coordinator. Um, and they said this isn't all the moves they're going to make. Supposedly more moves are coming. This is just the first three that were announced today. Uh, were you surprised by any of the moves?
No, I really wasn't. I was surprised there weren't initially more. And like you said, we're reporting, that Carmichael, Burns, and Bicknell aren't going to be the last. I expect Doug Marrone to be added to that list. Within the next 24 to 48 hours. Jari Evans might, be included in that, along with Kevin Petrie, DJ Williams. A couple of us have heard that Ronald Curry and Clancy Barone, the quarterback coach Curry and Barone being the tight end coach, that they might be safe. Personally, I think that's a little presumptuous because although Curry is going to be one of the candidates mentioned to be the next offensive coordinator, you can't say you're going to retain you can't guarantee you're going to retain any offensive coaches until you decide who the next coordinator is. That's just my opinion. Otherwise, that's a rather dysfunctional way of handling business. Uh, but Carmichael being gone, no, that didn't surprise me. It was needed. But yeah, let's give credit where credit is deserved too. Pete was with the team for 18 seasons, 15 of which were as the offensive coordinator. And I realized that 12 or 13 of those, he was Peyton's yes man, the behind the scenes guy. But nevertheless, he is still was still the longest tenured coordinator, offensive or defensive, in NFL history. So I mean, the man did something right, and he was a part of some of the NFL's most historically efficient offenses, in the history of the league. Yeah, Drew Brees and Sean Payton were the architects and orchestrators of this offense, but guys like Joe Brady, Joe Lombardi, Pete Carmichael, guys like that, they need to be given the credit that they deserve for the work they did behind the scenes. Was Carmichael out of his element, over his head as a play caller and the chief designer of the offense? I think that we can all agree that the answer is yes. But it's at the end of the day, these guys are human. They have families, and you're talking about a guy who just lost his job. So, while I certainly think that the move was needed to be made, we certainly thank Pete for all he did for New Orleans and wish him well in whatever the next chapter of his life is.
Yeah, Pete didn't even want the job to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
and he took it because DA really had no other options. Um, and this is part of the problem now finding coaches because you usually go like this is 2009 America's game, the Saints. And Peyton's talking about getting coaches. Well, where did his coaches come from at first? Well, a lot of them came from Dallas, his last job. The defensive coordinator was Gary Gibbs. That's who he got from. Yeah, look at Drew. He can hold that jersey up with his right arm. He hadn't even had permission to throw a football yet, and he's doing it. He's at that press conference. Anyway, Gary Gibbs, who does he start bringing in? He starts bringing in players from Dallas, like Scott Shanley, players that he knew. Well, where's DA Circle coming from? Well, DA Circle, unfortunately, is coming from the Raiders mainly. So, I'm worried where the next guy is going to come from. And part of the reason we had Pete Carmichael to begin with was that Pete Carmichael was an offensive assistant with the Chargers when Drew Brees was there, and he and Brees, and it's part of the reason why I have this jersey on. I just love this. It is the coolest Chargers look. But anyway, he brought in Carmichael because if I'm going to design an offense around the strength of Drew Brees, I want to bring in people that Drew is comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Carmichael, one of those guys. So yes, it is, Chad. It is a Breeze Chargers jersey. I bought this way back in 2005. In fact, right before the Saints signed him, I got this jersey. That's the summer before I got it because I just love these Chargers throwback jerseys. So yeah, got this before he was a Saint. But yeah, so I'm really curious where DA is going to find these replacements from. John Gruden's a name we keep hearing. They had an informal dinner before that. It's being rumored that Gruden is the guy. Gruden also has a lawsuit against the NFL. I don't know who the Raiders offensive coordinator was when DA was head coach.
Greg Olson was one of them. One of them.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So who are you thinking that could be the guy that Allen is looking at to replace Carmichael?
Well, and everybody and their mother is throwing out the name Eric Bieniemy right now. And it's not that Eric Bieniemy doesn't have a good offensive mind, but remember, the Saints already spurned him once and really strung him along while doing so. I find it hard to believe that Eric Bieniemy is going to circle around, or they're going to circle around back to Eric Bieniemy. And Eric, when he left Kansas City to become eventually become the offensive coordinator in Washington, it was kind of at least the thought process was to prove that he could design an offense on his own rather than kind of piggyback off Andy Reid's offense. And I think it's safe to say now Washington has other issues, just like New Orleans does. Washington has other issues other than coaching. But Eric Bieniemy's offense was nothing to write home about. Another name you guys are going to be hearing a lot, and a guy I like is Clint Kubiak, the quarterback coach for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, San Francisco's offense is Kyle Shanahan's baby. Of that, there could be no doubt. But the 49ers staff has been rated a lot in recent years with great success, both offensive and defensive guys. And remember, Clint Kubiak, formerly the offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, pretty good offense, son of former Denver Broncos offensive coordinator, head coach, and back to offensive coordinator Gary Kubiak. So that's that nice NFL genes, good offensive mind. Another name to watch, I think, is under the radar. Anthony Lynn, the running backs coach for San Francisco. He's had some moderate success as a head coach, good success as an offensive coordinator. Zach Robinson, the quarterback coach for the Rams. Offensive coordinator would obviously be a step up. And then we just mentioned Greg Olson, on the offensive staff in Seattle, a guy that Dennis Allen is very familiar with. Greg is a longtime offensive coordinator in the league. Ken Dorsey, fired offensive coordinator for the Bills, but he's had some success. Brian Callahan is a name I would love to see the Saints pursue. Now, Brian's going to get a few head coaching interviews, and if he doesn't get that job, you're talking maybe an Eric Bieniemy situation with Brian Callahan, because Cincinnati's offense, Joe Burrow, you have an elite quarterback, has been very successful, but it's an offense that a lot of people feel that is run by mainly the head coach out there. So maybe Brian Callahan is kind of itching to show, okay, I can design an offense on my own, guys. So maybe on paper, a move to someplace like New Orleans might be a parallel move, but it would look better on my resume in the long term. So those are some of the guys that I would keep an eye on. A long shot guy that you're hearing some rumblings in the Saints media already. Brian Hartline, offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Obviously, the Ohio State pipeline runs deep with New Orleans. Brian Hartline, a very successful NFL receiver too in his time. I can't see the Saints with Dennis Allen, and you would think his job being on the line, asking a collegiate coach to take such a big step up. I think Hartline will eventually be in the NFL and eventually do a good job in the NFL. I just don't know if that would be the right direction for New Orleans to go, but it's a name you're going to hear.
Hartline was a Saints assistant at one time, wasn't he?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not positive. If he was, it was only for a short term.
He was either an assistant or a player, maybe at one point. That name sounds awfully familiar, though. One of the names I'd heard, and this is on a rival, not so much a rival, it's probably one of the biggest podcasts out there, but I heard the offensive coordinator of the Texans. His name keeps coming up.
Slowick.
Yes. I hear his name come up. And that's what it is. That's what I'm glad you ran through that whole list of names, because this is the interesting part. Where does Allen get this guy from? Most of the hires that Sean Payton made in his tenure with the Saints were guys that he was affiliated with at some point in his career. Ex-Giants guys, ex-Cowboys guys, Eagles, going back to the Eagles, guys. The only hire that was way out in left field was, ironically, the guy who they're talking about in this video here. Come on, defensive coordinator. I just drew a blank on his name.
Williams.
Yes. Greg Williams. He was kind of stepping outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was part of the reason why I think their relationship wasn't very good. In fact, they got rocky by 2011, was that he was not a Peyton guy. Mm-hmm. He was an outsider whose job was to fix the defense. Peyton was willing to go outside the box. The offense needs fixing, but I don't know if Allen is comfortable enough to hire somebody and kind of turn the reins of the offense over to them and say, yeah, you're basically, because this is what Greg Williams kind of was. You're basically an assistant head coach, and you take care of this side of the ball for me. So I'm really curious to see who they bring in to interview, because I think that will say a lot about a coach that's essentially fighting for his job. Mm-hmm. He had a stay of execution because of the way they finished this past season, that they were still in the playoffs until really after they finished playing. They got a winning season, but that's not going to be enough. Like I said, 7 was the floor last year. 9 is now the floor this year, and it's got to be 10 and a playoff run. And you look at
Yeah.
the teams that played in playoffs yesterday and this past weekend, and a lot of the difference between somebody who is 13-4 and 9-8 was this much. You know, Dallas got humbled. The Eagles look like garbage. The Browns were one of the hottest teams in the league. They got destroyed by the Texans, and the Texans only got in because Jacksonville did this humongous collapse.
Yep.
So these are the things that Mickey Loomis is looking at. These are the things that the rest of the Saints front office is looking at, and this is what Allen's got to make these decisions on. So, the Rams getting eliminated too, but I'm not surprised by that. I thought the Rams were going to win, but I was not surprised to see the Lions come out there and destroy them.
No, I wasn't either. I thought the moment might be a little bit too big for the Lions and the Texans. Obviously, I was wrong. Both those teams, came out and had very impressive outings. And they're teams that I'm secretly not even so secretly rooting for, especially Detroit. I would love to see Detroit land in the Super Bowl if it can't be New Orleans. I would love to see Houston go to the Super Bowl. I wanted the winner of the Houston Cleveland game to advance out of the AFC, and I want the Lions to advance out of the NFC. Give us some new blood in there. But yeah, I mean, seeing the Cowboys get absolutely dismantled. And then the Eagles, as you said before we went on the air, the Eagles just blatantly gave up on their coach. That didn't look like a playoff team. That looked like a team fighting for a number 1 overall draft pick. I mean, that was a disgraceful performance.
Oh, when people were talking about, Dennis Allen's lost the locker room, Dennis Allen's players are going to quit on him. Dennis Allen's players don't like him. They don't respect him. And they pointed to that one play, which we dissected ad nauseum last week, but they pointed to that one play where they did things on their own. You watch that Monday night game between the Bucks and the Eagles. That's a team that quit on their coach.
Yes.
That's what a quitting team looks like. The half-hearted attempts at tackles, letting guys just run free, no enthusiasm on the sidelines. They were terrible. And like you said, they like a team that had their bags packed and were ready to go, get on a bus, go home, get that first overall pick, and we'll start over again with a new coach. Well, that's obviously not going to happen, but they sure played that way. I mean, I saw no energy on that team at all. Going back to the Lions thing, the guy they found that had been a season ticket holder for 66 years and was 89 years old. I'm like, I read Saints fans on Twitter upset and say, well, I'm not going to go any more Saints games since Dennis Allen is now the head coach. And I'm not going to go watch the Saints play, as long as Dennis Allen's there. Think of what that poor bastard went through for 66 years. I mean, you go through the Lions coaches and how bad those teams were. They went 0-16. He had to deal with Matt Millen as a GM. He watched, and I'm going to mention a name that you guys may or may not remember, Billy Sims, who should be in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Barry Sanders, Calvin, I just lost his last name.
Calvin Johnson, Herman Moore.
Herman Moore, Jerry Ball, the big nose tackle. I mean, Hall of Fame players rolling through that team and their seasons and their careers just wasted. these guys would say, you know what, I'm gonna retire. I'm this close to setting a record. Barry Sanders was this close to breaking Walter Payton's yardage record and becoming the
Yep.
all-time lead. And he said, you know what, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. I mean, year after year of Wayne Fonts. The silver stretch when they tried to do the run and shoot. You drafted two quarterbacks who you thought would fit that. You brought in Mouse Davis because you drafted Andre Ware from the University of Houston. You brought in Mouse Davis to run the offense he ran in college, thinking, okay, that's what it takes. And they still get it wrong. I mean, just it's. I kept looking at that guy going, that guy deserves every bit of happiness. I'm not even a Lions fan, and I'm like, I couldn't put up with this shit. I really couldn't.
Man, and by the way, you install the run and shoot offense when you have Barry friggin' Sanders as your running back. Think of that logic.
Mm-hmm.
That's like that would be exactly like installing the wishbone attack or the old T formation when you have Drew Brees at quarterback.
Yeah. It just everything they did was wrong, and it would fail spectacularly. And then in the Rams game, I'm watching. They ran this play 4 times. Now, Sean McVay is supposed to be this genius offensive mind. They ran the fade route to the corner to Cooper Kupp 4 times in the red zone, and Detroit knew it was coming every single time and had it covered, and they still kept doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, do something else. You score 1 touchdown, you win that game. But, of course, that's beside the point. And that and the fact that Ram fans were bitching about not getting calls. I mean, you're not going to get away with that with Saints fans on Twitter.
No.
They're going to roast you for that. So, Chad asked if I watched the Manning cast at Ray Lewis during the Eagles game. I saw some of it. I didn't see it all. But, yeah, I did see that part where Ray Lewis was he was furious, about the missed tackles and the poor angles. And they didn't want to say it, but it was obvious they quit. What game probably surprised you the most out of the playoffs?
Green Bay, Dallas. Not, and I acknowledge that Green Bay is a better team than what I thought they were. Defensively, I thought Jordan Love's has turned out to be a pretty darn good quarterback. Though, by the way, folks, please spare me the third Hall of Famer in succession: Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan. Not yet, guys, not yet. But the fact that Dallas collapsing in the playoffs, that part wasn't a shocker. But the fact that Green Bay just, it was borderline humiliation. 48-32 or whatever the final score ended up being. The game wasn't even close to that close. Mm-hmm. So the degree of which the Packers thoroughly dominated the Cowboys, I found the most surprising over the weekend.
Me too. And this is something else. This leads into the conversation we just had about finding an offensive coordinator. What you saw this weekend, you bring a defense and you bring a running game to the playoffs, you're probably going to have success. If your defense can generate turnovers, you're probably going to have success. That's what we saw all weekend. I don't care who it was. They were able to run the football. They were able to force turnovers, and their defense got shut teams down. They got stops, and that led to these blowouts that you saw with the Texans versus Cleveland, for example. They made Joe Flacco look like Joe Flacco because the Browns couldn't run the football.
Mm-hmm.
The Cowboys lost because the Packers pounded the football on them.
Mm-hmm.
They got turnovers. They made the plays. Um, so yeah, this is my favorite hit. That is
Yeah.
my favorite hit of Brett Favre, and Darren Sharper. Yeah, you got to mention him. I don't care what he did off the field. Uh, that's separate from this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What he did in these games in this season, they don't go to the Super Bowl without that. But anyway,
No.
that's the topic. Obviously he was a sleaze bag, scumbag, but I appreciate what you did in this game, and I appreciate what you did that year.
Yeah.
But and that was the key to winning all these playoff games over this weekend. So you need to find an offensive coordinator who believes in that, who believes in the running game. We've got receivers. I get it. You can get the big plays, you can get the strikes, but you need to have a running game that travels well on the road, plays in any kind of weather, and your defense needs to be able to get after the quarterback and shut things down.
Yeah. And you need look no further than the Philadelphia Eagles game to solidify exactly what you just said. Philadelphia, of all teams, the Philadelphia Eagles gave up on running the football after their first 3 plays last night. And this was a game that was still, at least score-wise, competitive into the third quarter. They gave up running the football, and they couldn't generate any pressure on Baker Mayfield. And that left a secondary that is probably the worst in the National Football League. It just left them to hang out to dry. That's the exact opposite formula that the Eagles used to win last season and the year before, for that matter, when they just bludgeoned people on both sides of the line. If I'm not mistaken, they set an NFL record for quarterback sacks by a team last year. They were the number 1 or number 2 rushing offense the previous 2 or 3 years, running. So. Like you said, and nobody's saying that these have to be the 70. You have to put together an offense like the 70 Steelers or the 72 Dolphins. You still, and Buffalo is another good example. Everybody's singing the praises of Josh Allen, but Buffalo looks like a different team to me this year, a legitimate Super Bowl contender this year, because they can run the football and they get turnovers on defense. And that's the way they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers every bit of, a not very good Steelers team, but still, that's the way they're winning games every bit as much as Josh Allen's abilities, if not more so.
Absolutely. One of the plays that Josh Allen scored on, he ran like 54 yards for a touchdown to make it 21-0, I think, at the time.
Yep.
So yeah, it's all about, you can use the passing game to get to the playoffs, but every year it goes back to the same formula. It's the running game, it's your defense, because the weather gets worse, and if you're going to be on the road, you want to win a road game. The way you win on the road is you have to be able to move the ball by running it and keeping that explosive offense on the sidelines.
Yep. Or at least doing so well enough to set yourself up on second and manageable and third and short, so that way your entire playbook is still open.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say the Dallas game surprised me. The Texans doing what they did to Cleveland surprised me. I expected a far closer game. I thought Cleveland I thought they had a good shot of getting to the next round. I didn't think they were going. I just thought the moment was, like you said, the moment was going to be too big for the Texans. I thought the Texans probably got in about a year too early to show the maturity and the growth to win in the playoff level. But they surprised me, and pleasantly surprised me. Pittsburgh, I expected to lose that game because that team is a mess.
Yeah.
They got in because a lot of teams collapsed. Excuse me. Like I said, guys, I'm fighting a cold. The 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 one playoff game we haven't talked much about. The God dang it, man! I got medicine has me in a fog. I apologize for this, guys. What other games were Saturday? Yeah, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and 2 Monday.
The Chiefs Dolphins fiasco. I got nothing to say about either team.
You. Yeah, Chiefs Dolphins. That was the one. That's the one we didn't talk much about. The reason why I'm going to bring that up, I know, it is what it is, but the Dolphins are a great example of the team I was thinking about when that threw the ball all over the field, scored 70 points against Sean Payton's Broncos. Looked like the explosive offense that everybody thought they was going to be. Get to the Chiefs in Arrowhead Stadium playing in -4-degree temperature. I think it was the 4th coldest game in NFL history. And they couldn't move the ball. They would try to throw the ball like they did in Miami, and they couldn't do it. They lost because they couldn't run the football. They lost because their defense could not get after Patrick Mahomes and shut down the offense. They lost because they collapsed during the season and lost to the Bills at the very end, gave the Bills the division championship. They now had to be on the road with an offense that was built for the warmth of Miami. Miami did everything wrong to get to the playoffs, and that's why they lost. And that's the only thing I really wanted to mention about that. When you look at how the rest of the teams won, and you look at Miami, and Miami's the kind of offense that people really like, especially on social media. It's flashy, it's explosive. Just your thoughts about Miami in general, that team. We had talked before about that offensive coordinator as being a possible head coaching guy. What are your thoughts about McDaniel and his offense and what he did wrong in that game?
Well, and again, it's a really fun offense to watch. And I'm a track guy, so you give me speed, and I'm going to be grinning ear to ear. But I also felt like the Miami Dolphins, and I mentioned this many times during the year, two teams that I felt like were doing it with mirrors, and I called frauds from time to time, were the Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins. Dallas, that's a no-brainer. Dallas is going to be frauds. Has been frauds almost every year, since Jimmy Johnson has left. But Miami looked like frauds to me, exactly because of what you said. They were the kind of offense that is built to win in warm weather and in favorable weather conditions. They were same with defensively. Who they reminded me of? And I thought about this as you were talking about their offense trying to travel and still doing the same things that they did all year long in cold and windy conditions. And I know you remember them. The San Diego Superchargers, Dan Fouts, Kellen Winslow, John Jefferson, and then after he was traded, Wes Chandler. Screw you, Mecom Saints, for trading Wes Chandler and Chuck Muncie away. But those Charger teams rolled through opponents all year long, every year for like four years straight. They get into the playoffs and they face a physical team, or they have to go into a cold weather city, like Cincinnati in the '81 AFC Championship game, and their offense can't do anything. Watching the Miami Dolphins against the Kansas City Chiefs, that's what I thought back to that, to that '81, '81 season, '82, AFC Championship game. where the Chargers went into Riverfront Stadium, still planned on throwing the ball 40 and 45 times, and minus 30-degree wind chill. Didn't work out so well for them either. And that's kind of the feeling that, and I like McDaniel as a coach for the Dolphins. He's a young guy. I expect he'll learn from this, and you will see the Dolphins build their offensive line, probably bring in a more physical running back, and bring in some physical guys for the front seven this offseason. Not to completely make over what they did, but again, we're watching the 2009 Saints highlights behind Allen there. Sean Payton built his teams to, yes, they were able to put up wonderful offensive numbers and offensive fireworks, but they won big games a lot of times during his tenure because Sean Payton built that Saints team to win in any kind of condition, in any kind of venue, in any kind of situation. And that's not how the Miami Dolphins are built right now. But again, I think McDaniel will learn from this and the Dolphins will ultimately be better for it.
Well, you don't have to go much further than the 2006 season playing in Chicago for the NFC Championship game, bitterly cold. And the Saints lost that game because they could not, ironically, run the football with Deuce McAllister on the team. They tried to throw it just like the Dolphins did this past year. So, yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to get to when you're talking about, a spectacular offense. You just can't do that kind of stuff in the playoffs because the competition level is elevated. The calls are not going to be the same. You really have to be able to control teams because players try and find that next level because of finality of each game. During the regular season, if a game's not going your way, you tend to go, well, you know what, we can play next week, regroup. It's not going to hurt us. There is no tomorrow, to quote Apollo Creed, there is no tomorrow. So that's how the players treat everything. So with that in mind, what one other thing that the rumor mill is carrying on about is that Mickey Loomis may kick himself upstairs to a more administrative overseer role, vice president of operations or something to that effect, in order to keep Kai Hartley, and you promote Kai Hartley to GM. Do you think, number one, do you think that's going to happen? And number two, what do you think of this move?
As far as thinking it's going to happen, I'm 50-50 on it because we've heard some conflicting reports. Because Nick Underhill has also come out this evening, just a little bit before we went on air, and said that that Loomis will remain in the same position. So I think Mickey was supposed to come to the stadium today, to make some sort of announcement. Many of us thought that it was the offensive coach's situation, but when he didn't, and he didn't because of the weather, he is now scheduled to tomorrow. When he didn't, and they went ahead with the announcement about Carmichael and the others anyway. That's when you started to hear the rumors that maybe he's going to announce that he might move himself into a different title, into a different role within the organization. So thinking it's going to happen, I'm 50-50 on that. Hoping it happens, I'm absolutely hopeful. Because frankly, folks, that's the only way they're going to be able to keep either Kai Hartley or Jeff Ireland. And is for Loomis to move to a different title and one of these guys, either Kai or Jeff, to get promoted to the GM role, because the Carolina Panthers are in hot pursuit of Kai right now. And as we speak, Jeff Ireland is preparing an interview with the Chargers. Both men are supposed to interview with other teams as well, as you would expect they would. To me, I like both Ireland and Hartley. To me, Hartley has put in his time with the Saints organization a little bit longer, worked his way up the ladder more, and frankly has been a lot more involved in the salary cap situation than what Jeff Ireland has. Jeff has been more on the scouting department end of things, on the personnel end of things. Now, if Loomis moves to a different spot in the organization and conceivably Kai Hartley gets his rightful and deserved role of general manager, hopefully with the Saints. And I think you and I talked about this before. If you're going to put Kai Hartley in a position like that, then you have to bring in someone who is very adept at the player personnel side. Hartley is a genius business-wise. A genius salary cap magician. Frankly, I think he deserves as much, if not more, credit for managing the salary cap than what Mickey Loomis has. But again, that's Kai's end of the business. It's not the player personnel. So you need to bring in a director of player personnel or whatever title you want to give, a guy that's really strong, a person that's really strong on that end of things, to move forward if Mickey Loomis is going to be out of the day-to-day football operations.
Absolutely. And that's really why I wanted to get into this conversation. We've talked about this before, like you said. People tend to look at GMs the way they saw Jim Finks. Jim Finks was the final authority on every aspect of the football operation. Since free agency, and this was the problem the Saints had once Finks died, free agency has demanded that your GM really has two roles. One, player personnel, and two, capologist. And the teams that jumped out early and were successful early with free agency were teams that figured out they needed a capologist first and then had a player personnel guy second. It's now been what? 30 years, it'll be 32 years this year since free agency started, 1993. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I should have said 32 years. I was right the first time. Regardless, now it's been about being able to manipulate the cap. And like you said, Kai Hartley is a genius at that because Kai Hartley has been a business guy, running the team like a business, figuring out ways to manipulate salaries so you can create ghost years, phantom years, and things like that that don't count towards the cap. And it only works if you have an owner who's willing to cut checks because that's what a restructure is.
Mm-hmm.
A player gets a whole bunch of money in the front end, cash. Gail writes a check, they get the money, player's happy, and the team is happy because now I can take that money and spread it out over the length of the contract, even do like a balloon note at the end with phantom numbers and things like that based off of incentives that they'll never, ever see because they're long gone, but the players happy because they got a lot of money up front.
Mm-hmm.
Kai Hartley's figured out every loophole to do that. That's why he needs to stay. That's why Carolina is after him because
Mm-hmm.
Carolina had tremendous cap problems. Part of the reason why they suck is because they've had so many cap problems. They want a guy who knows how to manipulate the cap. So I would like that for Hartley to be promoted. And the Saints have been putting him out there because they're trying to get more minorities into front office positions. I just do not want to lose him like we lost Terry Fontenot to the Falcons. I don't want him going to a competitor. I'd rather him go to an AFC team or something like that if he's going to go somewhere. That said, you mentioned Jeff Ireland getting a interview with the Chargers. That's another huge position the Saints need is the player personnel side. getting the guys that will make your team competitive. And Jeff Ireland has not had a lot of success in recent drafts, but he is responsible for the 2017 draft. How
Yeah.
big of a loss would Jeff
2016
Ireland
too.
be?
2016 also.
Yep. Yeah. How big of a loss would he be?
Bigger than what a lot of people believe. Because we kind of joked about this the last week or week before. That the Jeff Ireland supporters and the Mickey Loomis haters, they blame Loomis for Peyton Turner, Marcus Davenport. And they'll give credit to Ireland for Chauncey Gardner Johnson, A.T. Perry, if that works out, Brian Brissett. You see where I'm going with this. Uh, I think I love Jeff Ireland as a football man, and I have for a while. When the Saints brought him into the organization in 2016, I wasn't a bit surprised. That they had immediate draft success. Now, frankly, if you want to know why the Saints draft kind of flatlined there for a bit, it's because I believe Sean Payton took more control of the draft room and overruled a lot of the scouts. It's a fairly well known fact that he overruled the scouting department when it came to Cesar Ruiz. The Peyton Turner pick, that's all Sean Payton right there. The Saints have had some down drafts, no doubt about it. And by the way, this year's draft is way too early, to be degrading it or lauding it for any success. But Jeff Ireland is a football man. I mean, ideally, nobody hires Jeff. Mickey Loomis moves to a different part of the organization where he's still involved. Kai Harley gets the general manager position. And Jeff Ireland sticks around, and he's promoted, to a fancy title like player personnel director, president of player personnel, with a nice raise to come along with it, and a little bit more power on the play in the personnel and draft day decisions. That's my ideal scenario. We would be lucky, to keep all three of them. And I know people hate Mickey Loomis right now, but Mickey's done a lot of good things for this organization and franchise. So ideally to keep all three around would be terrific. We'll be lucky to keep one of them, I think, at the end of the day.
Calvin asks if you could keep one, Ireland or Kai, who you keeping?
I'm keeping Kai because I think it's easier to find a football guy in football than it is to find a good capologist. And you kind of made that point a little bit ago yourself. When you said, when free agency first hit the streets running, 30 something years ago, you saw teams have immediate success because it was just a bidding war. That's why, 49ers, Cowboys, a couple of decades later, Broncos, Patriots, in the AFC when they had cap room. But for sustained success, you need a cap guy. And look around the league at the teams that have had sustained success. It's because of two things: they've drafted well, obviously. But they've also managed to keep their core players. And the Saints, even though the last 3 years they've missed the playoffs, the sustained success they had between 2017 and 2020, really into 2021, if you just want to discount the injuries, it's because they really lost very, very few of their core players. That means you have a good cap manager in that front office. So that's why if I was forced to keep one of the two, I would keep Kai before I would Jeff.
Yeah, I agree with this because I think that it is a lot harder to find a financial guy. In Mickey did train and teach Kai all the things that he knows. Uh, but the important thing is that Kai is also shown in creativity to find things that even Mickey didn't know.
Yeah.
Um, So, and I think that's why he is such a hot commodity. Um, and Ireland has his guy he's been grooming to be head of scouting. So when he moves on, somebody else can slide in his place. Um, I think you can find a good personnel guy because you have the scouts and you have the philosophy in place. I think part of the reason, like you said, the Saints have had so much trouble with the draft is head coaches overruling the scouts because they fall in love with a player um, and not trusting the scouts. It seems that Dennis Allen trusts the scouts more than just going with his gut and saying, well, you know what? I know you got this guy rated at such and such. We really need an offensive tackle. By God, give me Penning. I think Penning was a decision from the scouts because Penning was a guy they watched the Senior Bowl,
Hmm.
ragdoll people who were going to be potential first rounders. And Allen was like, yeah, we need a left tackle. Who was the best left tackle we've seen? And Ronald Curry, who was at the Senior Bowl, said, look, I'm not putting this all on Ronald Curry, but I'm just using him as an example. I watch this guy Penning throw potential first rounders, guys that we have graded highly on our board, throw them around like they were children out there.
Hmm.
I think he would be a great fit. And I think that's why we end up with a guy like Penning, why we ended up like a guy with Lave, and so forth. Whereas Sean Payton was more like, this is the guy I want. This is the guy I want for this position. It's a little bit different. Um, the there's a lot of conversation going on in our group chat right now. And I'm trying to make sure I grab the good comments that fit what we're talking about. One of the guys that is going to participate in the Senior Bowl, speaking of the Senior Bowl, is Michael Penix Jr.,
Hmm.
who did not have a good national championship game, had a good Sugar Bowl. We've talked this ad nauseum. He is now tumbling on mock drafts, possibly even falling to the second round, which I think is ridiculous. But given that the Saints love guys that play in the Senior Bowl, and let's say for the sake of argument that Penix has a great Senior Bowl week of practice, do you think the Saints take him?
With their first round pick?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. I don't. I think Caleb. This might be a stretch, but I think if Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Derek May, all of those quarterbacks could fall to the Saints at 14, and they're not going to pick them. None of them. Reason being, Dennis Allen is the coach. Therefore, Derek Carr is the quarterback. End of story. And they still believe, at least until they tell us otherwise. And they could tell us by the actions rather than words too. But they still believe that they're only a couple of players away from competing for a legitimate championship. And seeing what Tampa Bay did to Philadelphia, and I think Tampa Bay has a real puncher's chance to go into Detroit and beat them too as well. Seeing if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go on a playoff run, that's just going to solidify the Saints' belief because the Saints only missed winning the NFC South by a half game. They dominated the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean that wasn't even close. In the next to last week of the regular season. So Saints fans, if you want a mini blow up to happen, the worst thing that could happen would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going on a sustained playoff run, because the Saints already believe, I think, that they're only a couple players away. They still believe at least somewhat in Dennis Allen as a coach. And Dennis Allen, come hell or high water, is going to go Derek Carr at quarterback. So they're not going to use a first-round draft choice on a quarterback. Do I believe they should, especially if a guy like Penix is there? Yeah. And if Michael Penix ridiculously falls to the second round, and I'm with you, at the end of the day, I don't think that happens.
No.
But if he does, and he's sitting there on the board when the Saints pick in the second round, I think maybe then a conversation is going to be had. But there's zero doubt in my mind that the Saints will not draft a quarterback in the first round, folks. None. It's not that I don't believe that they should. It's just that I feel 99.9% sure that they won't.
Yeah, and the reason why I even threw that question out there, because we're going to talk about these things over and over and over again between now and the draft. But one of the reasons I threw that comment out there is because we don't even know who their offensive coordinator is yet.
Exactly.
Before you start going into, who could be the guys that the Saints could draft and things like that. Let's get an offensive coordinator in here first. Let's get a philosophy. What is our philosophy going to be?
Yeah.
Let's figure out what kind of team it's going to be. The playoffs have shown that, like I said, running game, defense. What does Allen believe in the most? Running game, defense. He wants to build that part. You're going to find an offensive coordinator who believes those very same things, and you're going to find players that fill those roles. That's offensive line. That is defensive line. That is running back. Those are the positions that the Saints are going to target to try and upgrade and make this team that physical team that can travel on the road and win as well as win at home. So, that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And you just saw Baker Mayfield win a playoff game. You saw Joe Flacco take his team to the playoffs. You saw Mason Rudolph play well down the stretch. Derek Carr is at least as good as those guys, if not better. And even I say it like that because even the most bitter Derek Carr hater in the world has to at least acknowledge that statement that Carr is at least as good as Mason Rudolph, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Flacco. So that being the case, you then have to look at exactly what you just said. Where did the Saints struggle the most? Ignore quarterback for a minute because, again, not going to happen. They struggled along the offensive line, interior and attack. Everybody's saying tackle. I say they're going to focus on the interior just as much, but the entire offensive line and edge rusher. They have to give me, they have to get someone that could put opposing quarterbacks on the ground. So I firmly believe, that. I 100% believe that they're going to address these positions, certainly in free agency, but there's not a lot of money to play with. So you're gonna see a guy in the trenches, with either one of the two first picks they have, first and second round, if not both.
Absolutely. And I still feel that way. I still feel like it's going to be left tackle and edge rusher. Don't know which order it's going to be in yet, but I think those are the top two positions. I still think they go get an interior guy in free agency. They go get an interior defensive lineman in free agency. You got a lot of guys that, they'll find the money to get these guys. It just depends on how the draft falls. I mean, yeah, Brian, I would love to get Mercy in the first round. I'm knocking little kids and old ladies with walkers over if he's on the board at 14 and I can get him.
Hell yes.
But it's and Brian asked, we did talk about right before he came on, what happens if Jeff Ireland leaves? I think they've got the personnel in place. They've got somebody in mind to step up and take over this draft because Ryan Pace left in 2015 before the 2016 draft, and they hired Jeff Ireland to take Ryan Pace's place. And we actually got better at the draft. So I think They've got the scouts. They've got the people in place. They can afford to lose Jeff Ireland. I don't want him to go, but they can.
Yeah, the only way I would be really
But
worried is if
yeah,
if Mickey Loomis did take a different spot in the organization and they still lost both Jeff Ireland and Kai Harley, and they were a little bit later, in bringing an offensive coordinator. That's just an awful lot of chaotic moving parts, at one time to
yeah.
expect anything good to happen. That'd be the only way I'd be worried.
And I really wouldn't expect them to make a replacement hire right away, guys. The Senior Bowl's in a few weeks. That's an unofficial job fair. Yeah, we talked about this right before you came on the air, Brian. About that Kai, the rumor about Kai, and we'll see what happens on that. But don't expect to see an offensive coordinator named right away. You'll probably hear a lot of names, even more names than what Bob brought up. You'll see Gruden's name a lot because he's a known commodity. I would. We didn't even talk about Joel Thomas leaving to go to the Giants,
Right.
the running back coach. We don't know when. You don't know when these positions get filled. I wouldn't expect the staff to be completed until after Senior Bowl week. Does that sound reasonable to you, Bob?
Absolutely, and that's at the very minimum. Because remember, they can't even talk to assistant coaches from remaining playoff teams, until essentially the week before the Super Bowl, or the week between the conference championship games and the Super Bowl. So that leaves what, there are 8 teams left. That leaves some interesting coaches in limbo that you can't have any official contact with. You mentioned the Senior Bowl. There's a lot of behind the scenes meetings, closed door meetings, backdoor communications going on. Then it would not surprise me if this thing didn't get settled for at least another month or so. And as a result, you're not going to see Joe Thomas left. You're not going to see his position filled. If I'm right, and they part ways with Marrone, or Curry or any of those other guys, you're not going to see those positions get filled, because again, how are you going to fill the offensive staff positions when you don't have the coach in place to do so? That's a real dysfunctional way of doing business, and I think that would speak very, very badly of the New Orleans Saints. The only exception might be if there is legitimate interest in Gruden. They could bring him in, perhaps not as an offensive coordinator, but as a senior offensive consultant, and they just figure out what his role is going to be as they fill out the rest of the staff. That would be the only exception.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, Gruden does have a lawsuit against the NFL. So, the NFL could still come in and stick their hands and say, nope, can't hire him. So that's all in the mix as well. So, and I wouldn't put it past Goodell to say something like that, because if anything Goodell is, he's protective of the shield.
Sure.
Yeah. Last question before we talk about the Bayou Blitz tomorrow night. But what do you think is going to happen this weekend in the playoffs? Do you see any upsets coming?
I tell you the one upset that I'm feeling, and I hope I'm wrong. The Detroit Lions do not have a good secondary. And if they cannot pressure Baker Mayfield enough, and Mayfield has enough time, I could see Mike Evans, Cade Otton, Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer. I see them making some big plays. And conversely, we've seen good Jared Goff. We've seen bad Jared Goff, sometimes in the same game. If Jared Goff is a little bit off, and frankly, The Lions should have beaten the Rams by a couple of scores, but Goff had some rocky moments in the middle of that game. And if that happens again, and Detroit has a hard time, stopping Mayfield from getting into a rhythm, I can actually see Tampa Bay going into Detroit and knocking off the Lions. That's the potential upset I see. I'm still going to pick Detroit. As far as the rest, I'm going to go chalk. I think if Green Bay hangs with San Francisco early, that could be a real dogfight late. But I think the 49ers are just at the end of the day too good for the Packers. We talked about the moment being, whether the moment was too big for the Texans and Lions last week. You have to wonder about that this week, because you and I know a lot of former players, and all of them tell us the same thing. Each level of the playoffs, wild card to divisional to conference title to Super Bowl, you ratchet that up about 50 times more than what it was the previous round. The same question has to be asked of the Texans and Lions this week. How big is the moment going to be for them? Because the Ravens, hosting the Texans, with Lamar Jackson, who's, by the way, had his own playoff, letdowns, a lot of them. Who is the moment going to be too big for one of them? Is it going to be too big for Lamar again, or is it going to be too big for Houston? I see the Ravens winning that game, but I won't lie. I love John Harbaugh as the coach, but I won't lie. I'm rooting for Houston to pull off the upset. I think the Ravens take that one. Buffalo. Buffalo's a different, and we said it at the beginning of the show, Buffalo's a different team than we've seen the last couple of years. They're no longer Josh Allen by himself. Buffalo has a good defense, and they can run the football. If they remember those two things against Kansas City, and not let that collar get too tight around their neck, I think Buffalo can actually handle Kansas City fairly easily. And what's the one game I think I got them all, didn't I?
Yeah, you got them all. That's there's 4 games, and then there's 2 games.
So I went Buffalo, Baltimore, Detroit nervously, and San Francisco. So I went chalk.
Yeah. I think in the NFC it's a little bit easier. I think it's Detroit and the 49ers, just because I think that the teams that are left, they're not on that same level. And like you said, Detroit does does have its bad moments, but I think they will play at a level at home to get them to the championship game. I don't think they beat the 49ers. I think the 49ers go all the way this year. But I think they're good enough to knock off whoever they play in the postseason. I think that, they play. I just looked at this and I'm already forgetting. The Lions play Tampa, don't they?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The Lions play Tampa. So okay. And the Packers play the 49ers. Okay, that's what I thought. All right. I just, for some reason, I blanked out because I guess I'm thinking the old way. And I just don't see the Packers being able to upset the 49ers, because I think the 49ers, they will just make too many plays, especially Christian McCaffrey. The interesting thing is Baltimore has the easiest route to go to the Super Bowl, and that comes from being the number 1 seed. You're facing the Texans. I think the Texans playing in Baltimore, that's going to be a lot for them. Baltimore is not an unstoppable team, but I think this is going to be a lot for them, a lot for a team like the Texans to handle. I already said, I thought they were a year too early in the playoffs. But no, none of these games are Peacock only. None of these games are they're on regular I think they're all on regular channels. I think they're on CBS and Fox. I think the wild card was NBC, ESPN. But I think Baltimore wins that game. I think the Kansas City Buffalo game will be interesting because Kansas City doesn't score very many points. They
Mhm.
are not the unstoppable offense. They can get down the field. They settle for a lot of field goals. If Buffalo has problems scoring, though, they will lose that game.
Yes.
But they're playing in Buffalo, not in Kansas City. Huge difference. Not playing in Arrowhead. So I'm the same with you. I'm picking Baltimore, Buffalo. Uh, I'm picking the 49ers, and I'm picking the Lions. So, I'm picking all the home teams. But I think if any team gets upset, I think it'll be Buffalo has a chance of blowing that game. But personally, I
Yeah.
think I still have Buffalo not only being the Chiefs, but Buffalo winning the whole thing and going to the Super Bowl to play against the 49ers. Chris Berman's dream.
The Chris Berman
You
Bowl.
know? Yeah, the Chris Berman Bowl. So that's pretty much my prediction for this week. Real quick, what do you have going on in Bayou Blitz tomorrow night?
Undoubtedly, Brendan and I are going to talk about, like you and I did tonight. We're going to break down the divisional round playoff games, at least how we see them. Talk about the Saints coaching changes, what comes next, and who knows? If tomorrow is anywhere nearly as busy as today, we'll have even more news to talk about. Maybe we'll get some clarification on the Mickey Loomis situation. Like I said, I teased a couple times during the course of tonight's show. I expect something to happen with Doug Marrone and a couple of those other offensive assistants today. The Saints are not done making coaching staff moves, folks. You mark my words on that one.
No, absolutely. In fact, if I had to predict a surprise move, I predict they make a surprise move, a defensive line coach, and get
I've
a
thought
new
about that.
defensive line coach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if there's a surprise name that gets fired, it'll be a defensive line coach, and they will look for a different one. Just because of the disappointment they had with the lack of a pass rush and
Mm-hmm.
the lack of Brian Brzee was developed, but the lack of, I guess, opportunities for Foskey. They want
Yeah.
Foskey to step up and be the guy.
They need Foskey to step up and be the guy.
Absolutely. So anyway, thank you guys for sticking with us tonight. I apologize for coughing as much as I did. I tried to mute myself as many times as I could, but it just kind of sneaks up on me. And Bob, thank you for sticking with us as long as you did. I know I always keep you way too long, but in the meantime, enjoy the playoff games. I think they're all regular Fox and CBS. I think
Yes.
CBS has a Super Bowl this year, so you'll see all the games on regular TV. I know my dad was pissed off about Peacock. I've got it. I've got all the streaming shit. So, that's just how it goes. Anyway, thank y'all for joining us. We'll see you next time under the dome. Good night, everybody.